Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this, our webinar about the insights of our wonderful Lenborough Hoard. My name is Sue Shave. I'm the Museum Director at Bucks County Museum. And with me tonight, our speaker is researcher Wendy Scott. Hello, Wendy, who is supposed to be doing some study and research on the Hoard, but is being prevented by some large pandemic or other that's happening to go on at the moment. I understand she's in fact supposed to be in Denmark right now, but that's all off at the moment too, which we're very sorry about, Wendy. Although, of course, you could have done this from Denmark, because that's the beauty of webinars, is that people from all over the world actually can join us. And so we hope in the future that's exactly what they will do when we have webinars like this. So the Hoard, as you know, you're going to hear a lot about the significance of it, one of the most unique and largest hoards ever found, particularly for this period. And I know that some of you watching may well have given money towards the purchase of this. It's a very expensive hoard, very important piece. And alongside all of the larger funders like the National Heritage Memorial Fund, the Rothschild Foundation, the Headley Trust, Milton Keynes Museum, Buckingham Old Jail, the Art Fund, and lots of private donors, without whom we just wouldn't be sitting here now, and we certainly wouldn't be having this wonderful display that we're going to have in our new Discover Bucks galleries. The Hoard you're going to hear about tonight is going to feature as a central focus for our new Discover Bucks Archaeology Gallery. If you haven't heard about the Discover Bucks galleries, there's a lot of information about that on our website. We are hoping to launch these galleries in August. They tell the story of Bucks from 200 million years ago to today, about Bucks people and landscapes. So you'll hear a tiny bit about that later on tonight. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of you who've contributed towards the purchase of this fantastic and very significant artifact or artifacts. I always say that the Lenborough Hoard is a bit of an analogy for our organisation. And I say that because it was found here in Bucks-ish, so we're obviously, we're very central to Buckinghamshire and heritage and culture here. But also, as you know, the Hoard was found and came from all over the country, and indeed from other countries, and particularly Ireland, and you're going to hear about that. And that really says a lot about our own collections. We have very significant collections nationally and internationally. So I always feel that Lenborough Hoard is Discover Bucks Museum. So tonight we're very privileged to have Wendy with us. I've had a bit of a sneak preview already, so I can tell you that it's going to be a brilliant talk, and I learned so much just in 2 minutes listening to the précis. So I know that we're all going to learn loads tonight. But just to say that, as I said in my email, that the Q&A button along the bottom of your screens, if you hover along there, you'll find it with your cursor. Do please pose some questions as you go along. I'm sure you've got loads of questions for Wendy. She's not going to answer them until she's finished speaking, if that's okay. But don't feel that you can't then pose those questions as you're going along. And she's actually going to ask you some questions, and we're going to ask you some at the end about what you think. So it'll be our turn, but we're hoping to have that lively debate at the end. So if you know anybody that's missing tonight, please don't worry, because we're going to be recording it, and in a few days it will be up on our website. So without more ado, I'm going to hand over to Wendy, who's going to tell us all about this incredibly significant hoard. Wendy Scott.
Thank you, Sue. Good evening, everyone. I'd just like to start by saying this is the first time I've ever done an online webinar, so I'm very freaked out by the fact I can't see or hear any of you. So I just hope you find it interesting, and I'll just crack on with it. I just want to start by outlining the project, which is generously funded by the AHRC through the Midlands 4-City Doctoral Training Programme. I'm based at the University of Leicester, and I'm working in partnership with Bucks County Museum and the British Museum. And the aim of the project is to fully catalogue and analyse the Hoard, and then compare the corpus of contemporary coinage in order to assess the economic impact of Canute's reign. The full catalogue of the Hoard, including images, will be published online, and I'm also assisting Bucks County Museum with their new display. So the hoard was discovered, sorry, so I'm getting really distracted. Your face is in the way of my notes. If I can just pause for a moment and try and move that. That's better. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so the hoard was discovered in December 2014, and it contains 5,251 coins. 985 of those are Ethelred II, and that's a mixed issue parcel. The 4,500, and sorry, I'm getting really tongue-tied. 4,258 Knut's short cross issue. We've 4 Irish imitations of Ethelred, and we've got 4 Knut imitations, which are probably Scandinavian, but they need a bit more work. So the hoard contains 2 discrete parcels gathered at least a decade apart, and in total it amounts to about £21 in money. Now this is a decent amount of money, and for comparison, the Lenborough parish had an annual income of £6 at Doomsday, but some of the major landowners in the area were making hundreds of pounds at the same time. So it's not a vast fortune, but it's a decent amount of money. Okay, so why is the hoard important? Well, it's important because it's the largest hoard to contain just coins of Ethelred and Knut the Great. It's one of the largest hoards for its period of deposition, which is about the mid to late 1030s. It's probably the largest hoard of Knut's short cross issue. I have to say probably, because a hoard was found in 1991, which was said to have contained at least 6,000 coins of Knut. But very sadly, it was illegally dispersed and hasn't been recorded at all. So the Lenborough Hoard is certainly the largest hoard of Knut's reign to be made available for study. And this is a very important fact, as Knut's coinage and his reign have been woefully overlooked by historians and numismatists, and the hoard gives us a really good opportunity to put this right. The hoard's container is also very important. It's a pasty-shaped lead envelope. Such containers are quite rare, but they are known for medieval coin hoards. The Lenborough Hoard is actually the earliest container associated with an English coin hoard, but lead is also associated with earlier Viking hoards across Britain. And if time allows, we hope to take advantage of new lead analysis techniques to learn more about this practice. And we're lucky that the then Flo Ros was in attendance at this rally, and she managed to get the hoard partially recorded in the ground. Now, these images are extremely important in lieu of excavation, and one of the things that excavation would have told us was whether the 2 parcels were mixed or separated within the container. Now, I can see from these images that all the coins on the top appear to be Knut's. So this, and the fact that 20 of his pennies were stuck within the lead container's folded edge, suggests strongly that the Knut parcel was probably laid on top of the separate parcel of Ethelred's. And if Ros hadn't been present, we probably wouldn't have this useful information. I'd just like to use that as a plea to anyone who might be lucky enough to find a hoard in the future. If you do, please try and leave it in the ground and call for help. Even if it's just advice over the phone, it can make such a difference to get it recorded properly. Okay, so on to what I've been doing. My first task was to get the hoard fully catalogued and photographed, and I was very lucky that I managed to complete this process just before the first lockdown was announced. I think it was about a week and a half before. And obviously the pandemic has greatly affected the project, especially as I'm based in Leicester, where we've had the longest period of lockdown in the country. I should have undertaken data collection at the British Museum last summer, and as Sue mentioned earlier, I should pretty much be in Copenhagen now studying their collections. I would just like to point out that had I been at the British Museum, I would have had all my images edited by their bespoke software, and because that hasn't happened, I've had to use raw images tonight, so I apologise for the scruffiness of the coin images. So instead of physical data, I've managed to gather 28,000 digital coin records from extremely helpful colleagues, especially in Scandinavia, where the bulk of these coins are curated. I've still got a few more to collect, but I'm guessing my total might be around 30,000 mark when I'm done. I've also received a very generous grant from the Royal Numismatic Society, which has enabled me to buy some Scandinavian books which have a lot of English coin data in, which is a decent substitute for having a trip to Scandinavia. I've also used the time as best as I can with doing as much research as possible with digital publications, but I still need to get back into the library and get out there and get some more information. So the plan at the moment is that I will spend this summer working at the British Museum. I'll be cataloguing their collection, getting the Lenborough photos edited, and also assisting Gareth Williams with a recently found Canute hoard, and all that data will contribute to the project. So I've just put up some numismatic terms that I'm going to mention during the talk in case I forget to explain them. So basically, coins of this period are made by striking a flan between two engraved dies. One would be set in a bench, the other would be held in the moneyer's hand, and it would be struck with a hammer, hence the term hammered coins. The designs would change fairly regularly, and these are what we call issues. The coin's obverse would bear the name and image of the king, and in this period, we're extremely lucky that the reverse design also includes the mint and the moneyer's name. Inscriptions on the coins are usually rendered in a mixture of Old English and Latin, with a few notable exceptions. So I'm now going to discuss some of the interesting features within the hoard, and then discuss Canute and how we can use the hoard to learn more about his reign. So firstly, a small proportion of the hoard are bent, and this was done to test the purity. This is a practice that is known in 10th and 11th century hoards across Britain. But as these coins were moving around Northern Europe quite a lot, there is some debate as to whether this is being done in England by English or Scandinavian populations, or if the coins are actually returning from Scandinavia bent, where the process is much more common. So the majority of the Ethelred coins have been bent sort of between 45 to 90 degrees, as can be seen in this image. I don't know who took this image, but I've got it in the folder, so thank you to whoever took the image. There is one notable exception. This coin of Ethelred has been folded almost in half. The Canute examples have a mixture of slight bends, with a few having quite extreme bendings like this one in the photo. Now this actually needs a bit more investigation, as it's been argued that this practice may have been applied to batches of coins, with each coin being bent to the same degree. So one of the things I need to do when I can get back to the museum store is actually measure the degree of the bend and see if there's any evidence for batch bending in the hoard. We've also got 7 coins with signs of pecking. 4 of the Ethelred coins are pegged and 3 of the Canute. And this slide shows the 2 coins that have the most pecking. So the one on the left is a Canute coin with 2 pegs, and then the one on the right has got 3 pegs. So this is another method of testing a coin's purity. And you'd use a knife edge to basically poke the coin to check that it's solid silver, that it's not just silver plated. And as with bent coins, this could have been done in England whilst in circulation, or it could have happened in Scandinavia. But with these coins, either way, they've been through the hands of Scandinavians, as pecking was not a practice carried out by the English. So I'm just going to talk about the 2 separate parcels. So the Ethelred parcel is what we would term a currency hoard. It's got a range of issues in it that date from the mid-990s to the end of his reign in 1016. And the dates of the coins and the number of mints represented strongly suggest that the parcel of coins has been in general circulation for some time before being collected and placed in the hoard. Now, for some reason, these coins have been retained past the point that they were legal tender. These coins should have been exchanged for new coins when the issues were changed, like we've had to do recently with our old pound coins. And we think the issues were changed fairly regularly, but we don't know. And we think that the changes seem to be more common when the crown actually needed to raise revenue. And this was something that was clearly practiced during Ethelred's reign, when he needed access to lots of cash to pay all those girls. So everyone in the country would have been expected to exchange their coins, with the mint taking a small fee to provide this service. And we also know that throughout an issue, the weight of the coin would drop very, very slightly, which would provide an extra profit to the moneyer and to the state. We do know from hoards that retaining old coins is a common practice, and this could be linked to the weight of the coins. It's possible that the older, heavier coins were worth more as bullion than the face value of the new coins. Another theory is that official transactions like taxes had to be made in current coin. So it's possible that people could have avoided paying heavier mint fees by just exchanging the coins they needed for official transactions, and they possibly carried on spending the old money locally because everyone knew it was good. It just wasn't the current issue. So whatever the reason, this parcel does appear to be demonstrating this practice. The last small cross issue of Ethelred, which is the largest in this parcel, nationally has a weight range between 1.3 and 1.7 grams. The coins in this parcel weigh between 1.5 and 1.9 grams, with 407 being heavier than 1.7 grams. So they're heavier than the national average for this coinage. Now that would suggest that the hoard's owner has deliberately retained these really heavy coins, and he's probably only exchanged his lighter coins for Canute's first issue. And this is just one type of economic insight we can gain from studying these really interesting coin hoards. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a few individual coins now. This is one of the Dublin imitations, and it was made using a die that was acquired from Winchester. Now, reverse dies are unique to the Munir, so this one has either been sold or stolen to be used for the Dublin coins. So these imitations, they're not forgeries as such, they're not designed to deceive anyone, they're just copying a trusted coin in order to make their issues seem as trustworthy as the coins they're copying. And this is a fact that went on for quite some time. English money was so trusted, it was actually widely copied across Europe well into the high medieval period. So this coin, the obverse of this coin reads Citrig Cunning Dufflin. And this uses the Old Norse word for king instead of the Latin rex, which would be used on all English coins. And the reverse reads Godwin Mo Wint, which is an abbreviation for Godwin, the Munir of Winchester. And the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that they've used a P for the letter W, and this is because it's the Old English letter Win, which is the worst sound. Okay. This is another Irish coin. We've got two of these in the hoard, and these are clearly Dublin coins because they say Dublin on the reverse where they should say the name of the mint. However, the obverse name's Ethelred rather than Citrig, but it's slightly different to an Ethelred coin. If you look at it closely, it's got additional crosses, and his face has got this wonderful expression like he's puckering up to give someone a kiss. So if you were handling these coins and you were bothered to look at them closely, you would see that the front was slightly different and the mint name is different, if you could read the mint name, that is. But we think that most people just wouldn't have bothered doing this, and the coins were probably either freely circulating in England, or perhaps they were picked up in change in areas that were actively trading with Ireland. Now, all of our imitations have very good quality engraved dies, and some studies have actually suggested that the Chester Mint may have been producing coins for the Dublin Vikings. And this is a practice which is still carried out today. As I'm sure you all know, the Royal Mint makes money for many, many countries across the world because English coins are recognised to be quality. Okay, so this is an English coin, but it's an extremely rare Munir. Now, I've only found one reference to this, and that is from Hildebrand's 1850 publications. Now, he was a Scandinavian numismatist who basically published all English coins in Scandinavian hoards. I've not been able to find an example of this Munir in the Danish or Norwegian coin data that I've been provided, and I've only heard of one example from England, which was sold at auction. So this would appear to be a very rare coin, and we've actually got two examples of his coins. Each one has a different reverse die, which is why you can see two reverses on the screen. So this suggests that this money made quite a decent amount of money. He's worn out at least one coin die and had a second one made. But until more coins are actually found with this money, they're going to remain very, very rare indeed. So we're very lucky to have these in the hoard. And this is obviously the rarest coin of Ethelred. This is an extremely short-lived issue. We think it was produced sometime in 1009, and it may be linked to political events. At the moment, there are 21 examples of this regular coin that's shown on the screen. Its religious imagery has been interpreted as either a plea for peace and forgiveness by Ethelred, who wasn't having a great time in 1009, or it's possibly the invocation of the power of God against the pesky Vikings who are bothering the English. Now, the coin in the Lenborough Hoard is far, far, far rarer than the Agnus Dei coin because it's a mule. So this is a coin that's been accidentally made with the dies from two different issues. So our example has a last small cross reverse, and this is the only second known mule for this issue. The other one is in Sweden, and it has a different obverse die, but the same reverse die. So we know that both of these coins were made by Ethelwine in Stamford. And this coin is really, really important for several reasons. The first and most important to us is that Lenborough is the first hoard to contain any of these coins. So that's either regular or mules. So it's the first of 23 examples to be found in a hoard. It's also only the fourth example ever found in England, and considering it's an English issue, that's quite unusual. The coin is also very important for numismatic study, as it's confirmed that two moneyers have shared the same obverse die at Stamford, and the money who made the mules has used two different obverse dies. Now, die sharing is extremely unusual. Each moneyer would have had his own die at his bench and he would have just used it. So the fact that they're sharing dies suggests something very unusual is going on. It's an unprecedented issue, perhaps, or maybe there was an urgent demand for this coinage and everyone was scrabbling around to make as many as possible. So that begs the question. We've got several dies, which would suggest possibly thousands of coins were made. So where are the rest of them? So that's a question for the audience. Most of the others were found in Scandinavia, which makes sense because a lot of money was going there during Ethelred's reign. And a few examples have been found with holes in them. So they've been worn as pendants, possibly for religious reasons. But yeah, where are all the other coins? It's an absolute puzzle. We just don't know where they are. So on to Canute. The bulk of the hoard is obviously Canute's short cross issue from the later half of his reign. And it's this parcel that, in addition to all the wonderful unusual coins, makes the hoard really important. It's a very, very large sample of coinage from a king whose entire coinage is vastly understudied, and it's already providing extremely useful data. And as I said earlier, we've got 4 imitations that are probably Scandinavian. These coins were widely copied over there, but I still need to find some parallels for them to confirm that. Okay, so on to some rare examples of the short cross coins. This is a very unusual type, which has a lance in place of a sceptre. You can just see that there. This is supposedly known from 3 mints, which are Winchester, Hastings and Lincoln. Now we have 3 examples in the hoard, which were made in Lincoln, and they all appear to be from the same die. But I've only found published references to the Winchester issue so far, and nothing at all for the Lincoln examples or the Hastings examples. So at the moment, I'm assuming that these are extremely rare coins, but again, I need to do some more work. And the other thing about the sceptre is that that is used on every other coin in our hoard. And I have noticed some variation. And at the moment, I think there's about maybe 4 to 6 variations of the way the sceptre's depicted on the dies. So I'm going to try and log all these, and it may tell us something about the chronology of this large coinage. It's a very, very big coinage, and we don't actually know when they began to produce it. And we don't know how long the issues were made, so that there's hopefully some information I can glean from the sceptres being slightly different. Another thing it might tell me is if the dies are regionally produced. So if various types are all clustered in one area, that will tell us that the dies are being produced regionally, not centrally. This is another extremely rare coin. I've only found one other example for this munir, and that was recorded by the Fitzwilliam Museum's Early Medieval Coin Index and was a public find. So it's probably a metal detectorist find. Now that example has a different reverse die to our example. So again, that's showing that this munir issued quite a few coins, but as far as I'm aware, there's only 2 of them known. So again, we need more coins to be found, or it's going to stay extremely rare. I'd just like to point out that the reverse is a nice example of Old English spelling. So the munir mint is actually pronounced seaward on watches. And again, the eagle-eyed amongst you will know that there's a D at the end of the mint name, and this actually represents the Old English letter thorn, which is a third sound in watches. Right, now moving on to coins that are quite common. These are coins minted in London, which is obviously producing a very large amount of English coinage. We've got 68 examples of this munir swan in the Hoard. And so far, I've noticed that quite a lot of them seem to be die linked. So this means that they've both been struck from the same pair of dies and are pretty much identical. Now, die links are extremely useful and are quite easy to check. So I've shown in the slide here that I've got a semi-transparent image of a coin, and I've overlaid it over a solid image to produce the image on the right. Now, as you can see, it pretty much matches. The only difference is that one flan is wider than the other one. Now, I'm hoping that my study will include a lot of die link analysis, but obviously that depends on how long I have time to do that. And this kind of study can provide really, really useful information about the amount of circulating a coin has done. So, for example, if a coin from an individual munir has lots and lots of die links, that would show that they haven't circulated very much. So the batch of coins might have come directly from the mint into our hoard, for example, or they may have just been used in one or two large transactions, so the coins from the same batch kind of stay together a bit longer. So that would suggest not much circulation. And conversely, if there are very, very few die links within the hoard, that would point to more general circulation, with the coinage being mixed up quite a lot before it's been deposited. And also, if we have a lot of mints with a high number of die links, that could possibly point to where the transactions are happening, and it might actually tell us where the hoard deposit has been trading, for instance. Okay, now this is an intriguing little coin that I stumbled across whilst I was looking up Swan of London. And so this is the EMC database at the Fitzwilliam Museum. And as you can see, it was found in Little Hoard, which I quickly looked up and realised it's extremely close to Lenborough. And just by looking at the images, it does appear to match the coins that I've got in the hoard. So they could be from the same batch, but sadly I can't prove that unless somebody brings the coin to show me. We can't prove how that coin got from London to Little Hoard, but we can use our imagination and make some suggestions. So perhaps it was part of a batch that came direct from London with our hoard's owner, and he might have popped into Buckingham on the way home and bought something, and then that trader's taken it home to Little Hoard. Another idea might be that the coins came into Buckingham in the same batch, and their owner then did business with 2 local traders, one of whom is our hoard's depositor. So I'm just going to open that up to you as the audience and tell me what you think about how that coin got to Little Hoard from London. Okay, so I'll be talking about die links, and another thing that die links can tell us is how long the die was in use. Now, what I've tried to show here is a die being worn out. Now, you have to bear with me because this is new to me as well. It's something I'm still learning. But I think I can see that in these dies, they've got distinct similarities. So they've got one overlarge pellet, they've got a composite S, the way it's been produced, and they do look very similar. So the one on the left, to me, seems quite fresh. And then the one in the centre has picked up a bit of damage here. And this area here is either a misstriking or it could be wear on the coin whilst it's been in circulation. And then one on the right still has the same nick. So if you imagine old-fashioned photocopiers with a scratch on the lens, so that error is just repeated and repeated in every single coin that's produced. And then here we've got a bit more damage to the cross. And overall, the lettering on this one seems to be a lot more worn and rounded, whereas on the other coins, they're a lot more angular and sharper. So information like this, as I say, can tell us the lifespan of a die. I very much doubt that I'll have time to do this, but such studies are really useful. And the fact that we've recorded every single coin as a photograph that we're going to put online means that some researcher will have the opportunity to do such a study if they wish, and hopefully they will. And I'm sure we can shout about it and tell everyone that we've got this wonderful online database when we get it live, and hopefully people will use it quite a lot. Okay, so we've got some, as I said, we've got some short cross imitations that are probably Scandinavian. And if you look at the inscription, you can see it's quite garbled, which is one big clue that it's an imitation and someone who couldn't read English. And we've also got, if I just click on, we've got what we call ligated or legated letters, which means they've been merged together to save space. And on this one, we've got an N, which is backwards, which is another clue that it's an imitation because they've forgotten to do it backwards on the die. And it's connected to an F, again, to save space. And then we've got two imitations of Canute that have English reverse dies. Now, this one's quite unusual because it has an obverse inscription that reminds me of the Irish example I showed you earlier. So if you look at the inscription, it's almost like an anagram of Canute Rex Duffley. But we know it can't be Irish because about 1020, the Dublin Mint stopped copying contemporary English coins, and they carried on with their own version of Ethelred's long cross, and that was in use for decades. So this coin can't be Irish, it's very likely Scandinavian, and it looks as though the person who made the die has basically merged an English portrait with a garbled Irish inscription, and he's used an English reverse die. And that's not that unusual because we do know that English money has helped Canute to improve his Danish coinage, and we think that some moneyers might have actually travelled to Scandinavia to help do this, you know, improve the coinage. So this die might have gone to Scandinavia with its money, and he may have just lost it or given it to someone to make these imitations. We just don't know. I'm going to move on now to what we can actually learn from the Hoard. So part of my project will be analysing as many contemporary coins as possible. As I say, at the moment, I've got about 28,000 digital coin records, which will keep me busy for quite some time. And I'm really hoping that these will provide useful information about the economy during Canute's reign. And as I said before, he's woefully undervalued by historians and numismatists. He's so undervalued that his conquest of England is barely mentioned, even in academic publications that focus on the 11th century, which I find quite shocking. And obviously there's a reason for this, because 50 years after Canute conquered England, in 1066, some Normans turned up and stole all the attention from poor Canute. So their conquest obviously left other very tangible things as well, like big Norman castles and the Domesday Survey. And 1066 is probably one of the dates that most people have heard of and can actually tell you what happened in 1066. And sadly for Canute, his reputation hasn't been helped by the one fact that most people think they know about him, which is obviously the famous turning back the waves. This is actually one of the most misrepresented events in English history, and it's not been helped that it's been used in lots and lots of satire, like these very recent examples show. So what poor Canute was actually trying to demonstrate to his cause on that beach was that only God had the power to command the tide, and that men should obey him and not mere kings. And unfortunately for Canute, it's been very, very misunderstood. And one of the things that we need to remember about Canute is he was actually a Christian. His grandfather converted Denmark to Christianity, and during his reign, he travelled to Rome to meet the Pope. And throughout his reign, he made very generous gifts to religious establishments, as is shown on this wonderful contemporary image of him presenting a massive gold cross to Winchester Abbey. And this is a really wonderful illustration because it's one of the few contemporary images of Canute. And he's got this rather wonderful Scandinavian style sword that's erupting from the border of the portrait. It's absolutely wonderful. Now, it has been suggested recently by a few historians that Canute was actually emulating his celebrated predecessor, Athelstan, and he was famously pious, but he was also a great warrior, and he was the first king to unite the English and claim overlordship of all Britain, with kings subject to him. And Canute managed to maintain Athelstan's united English kingdom, but he also surpassed Athelstan's ambitions by actually becoming an emperor. England became part of his Scandinavian empire, and he also built diplomatic relationships across Europe, which vastly benefited trade at home. And another thing about Canute that most people don't know is that he probably gave our country its name. Before his reign, we were referred to across Europe as the Kingdom of the English, and the term Englerland had been used a few times late in Ethelred's reign, but Canute decided to use it systematically in all documentation when referring to the country, and so it's down to him that we have the modern name England. Okay, now I'm going to bore you to death with some slides of graphs. One of the more tangible things we do have from Canute's reign is his coinage. And throughout the project, I will be looking at mint output, coin circulation, and hoard composition to try and assess the economic impact of his reign. Now, this graph shows all the mints represented in the hoard by 50 or more coins of Canute. And if we work on the very crude assumption that there are 4 times more Canute coins than Ethelred's in the hoard, we can see that some of the ratios are much higher than the expected 4 to 1. And just a caveat here, a mint's output would obviously have been affected by economic or political factors during and between the 2 reigns, and that's something that I'll have to look at. But you can clearly see that the most productive mints on the right, there's an increase in the northern mints. So I'll just highlight those. Lincoln, York, Leicester, Thetford and Chester all have more coins in the hoard than would be expected. Now, there are several reasons for this. It could be that the hoard's owner is trading with the Danelaw, or that he just conducted a very large transaction with someone who had. And Buckingham's proximity to the Danelaw boundary of Watling Street would strengthen that suggestion. However, it could just be an economic trend in that area. And we know that Eastern and Southern England was trading with Scandinavia probably for centuries at this point, and all of these towns had access to the sea to facilitate trade. So the increase in coin production might just relate to more international trade and more wealth in that area. So the idea is, if I find a similar ratio for these mints in all of the English coinage, then the latter explanation is more plausible. However, there is also a higher number of coins from ports. So on this graph, you can see Bath, Exeter and Dover have considerable increases in their coin ratios. So again, this could point to the trade network of the hoard's owner, but it could also suggest a general increase in trade during Canute's reign. We do know that Bristol, Sandwich and Winchelsea were actually developed as ports associated with royal estates during Canute's reign, and he also set up the mint of Bristol in 1017, and we've got 21 of their coins in the hoard. Now, Canute actually gifted Winchelsea to a Norman abbey in 1017, and this is very likely a diplomatic gift to Duke Richard of Normandy, as Canute married his daughter and Ethelred's widow, Emma of Normandy, in that year. It's a very generous gift. We also have a very important letter from 1027 written after Canute's visit to Rome, in which he attended the Holy Roman Emperor's coronation. So that alone shows that he's a respected king amongst the Europeans. Now, this letter confirms that he had arranged tariff-free trade across Europe for all the English, which is a really, really important thing for a king to manage to do. And it's probably something we could do with right now. And again, if the patterns that are showing in this hoard continue through all the coinage of this period, it will provide really strong evidence for a general increase in European trade with all the English ports especially, and it will provide supporting evidence for the growth of towns during this period as well. Right, so obviously I've got a lot of work to do, but I'm looking forward to sharing some of my results in the Hoard's new display, which is currently being developed. So we're hoping that the Hoard will introduce the public to Canute's forgotten conquest. We're going to display as many coins as possible in these wonderful big upright cases, and we're going to try and tell the stories of some of the more special coins in the desktop cases. And we will have some interactives, which we're going to ask you about in a moment, because obviously this is still in development and we want to make it something that people actually want to interact with. Okay, so I'm going to stop now. I hope that I've managed to convey just how interesting this hoard is, and that the coins are really documented metal, and they provide really, really useful information to historians and archaeologists on so many levels. And I'd just like to say that I'm really, really looking forward to a time when I can actually come and show off some of the hoard in person at the museum. So thank you very much for listening to me witter on, and I'll now pass you back to Sue.
Well, thank you very much, Wendy. That was absolutely fascinating. I really didn't know all the things that you've talked about what a great king Canute was, and how stable the economy was, and what he got up to. So that and all of the fine detail about the coins is just incredible. So thank you very much for your time this evening. As you said, I think we want to ask our audience some questions, because as you saw the display there that we are still putting together, and still there's a team working on this and what it might look like. So the displays also will incorporate some, let's call them interactive displays. So we want to ask you a few questions. So I'm going to launch some polls for you. I'm going to start first of all just by asking you about how you heard about us, and hopefully what's come up on your screen is something you can vote on. So please do just select the answer that seems most right to you. This is a multiple choice, so you can have heard about it in lots of different ways. If by any chance there is something not there, because this is closed question time, please put it in the Q&A so that we do know. But I can see you all voting there, so still voting going on. At the moment, our e-news seems to be winning the poll. I'll be able to share this with you in a minute when you've all stopped voting. No, still people voting? Still thinking about it? Okay, I think people have stopped voting, so I'm going to share the results with you all now. So hopefully you can see there that that's really helpful. So we know that lots of you signed up immediately when you saw this. Very popular topic, and why not? Very, very significant artifacts, as we were saying. But that's really helpful to know that passing it on by word of mouth is really helpful as well, and the social media, and particularly Bucks Archaeological Society, many of whom are with us tonight. Thank you very much indeed. So, so now we're going to move on to ask you about what you think about what type of activities we might have. So what should appear on your screen, hopefully, I'll be able to see if you're voting on them or not. What should appear is 3 polls about the 3 different things that we're potentially planning to put in. So one of them, for example, will be a selfie of good quality replica Saxon sword and a Viking axe, but as a selfie opportunity so that you can safely hold them but not wield them around and chop people's heads off with them. A coin striker, which we felt was rather important in terms of some of the things that Wendy's been telling you about tonight, that people don't understand how coins were produced at all, but still don't, I'm sure. And also what else you might want, whether you want perhaps a coin design activity. So some of the things these really important things, it isn't just a bunch of coins. There's lots of different features about how they were made and the money and so on. So those 3 things should appear right about now. I hope you're seeing them all. So if you could just vote, they are yes or no. You don't get multiple choice on this one. So love to see what you all think. What do you think about these three? Do you think we should have them? Are they really good or are they bad ideas? Obviously, be completely honest about it. Still see people voting. Oh, well, it's oh, that's very interesting. Oh no, people changing their minds now. Then we've got people saying, no, I didn't mean that. No, I'm going to change what I'm saying. No, seriously, it is. I'm not going to, I'll share it in a sec when the things have stopped moving. They're jumping about all over the place. Wow. Definitely lots of views now. Still moving. Wow, okay, so I think it's sort of stopped. No, a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to end the polling now, folks, okay? End polling. Right, now I'm going to share the results. So that's really interesting because the replica sword and Viking axe started off at 100%. You can't see that, but I can as the host. But look at that, it changed. Most of you now think, 70% of you, not so keen on that idea. 31 of you think it's great. Coin striker, well, 90% of you say yes to that. So that's fairly open and shut, don't you think, Wendy?
Yeah, yeah.
And then the coin, design your own coin, again, 80% of people saying that they think that's going to be something that they really want to see. So that's really interesting. Thank you. Lucy's just posted that, yes, they aren't. You're absolutely right. This is a bunch of adults. Lucy is saying it's all adults voting. We think, and we deliberately didn't ask you because, you know, we're creating these and you know, we've learned from doing a lot of consultation recently that a lot of children and adults say, please don't, you know, tell us this is specifically for children or specifically for adults. You know, we're interested in what we're interested in. You know, children are small people. So, you know, so I completely agree. And we understand that obviously the audience is of a specific type, but just really interesting because they did all, Lucy, start off saying that it was a great idea. So that's really interesting. Thank you all very much for your views. Okay, and then last question, come here, last question. Okay, so now we're just going to ask you what you think about the extra interpretation, because obviously there's lots and lots of stories that we want to tell. We don't want to overwhelm people with too much information. So we've got some examples coming up on your screen now. So we're planning to have some A4 information folders, so that would enable us to tell more stories about the Horde. And as you can hear, there's lots of different kinds of stories. Whether we would have some kind of publication that we perhaps even might sell, and then maybe some enlarged images of the most unusual coins. You've heard some, you know, there's lots of marvelous detail tonight in Wendy's presentation. So, yep, people are starting to vote now. Let's see what you all have to say. QR codes, suggestion from Lucy. QR codes, okay. What do you think about that, Wendy? QR codes?
It's always good, yeah.
Yeah, so we perhaps take that back to the designers as well. People are still voting. It is very interesting. Mind changing also happening here, but not quite the same because it's a multiple choice. So you are allowed to like all three if you really want to. Looks like people have stopped voting, so I'm going to end the voting and share results. So as you can see there, yeah, the enlarged images, I think that was Wendy's suggestion, nearly 90% there, Wendy, so that's big tick there. People like the publication. I think there are plans, are there, Wendy, to have a publication?
If you want one, we can write one.
Okay, so it looks like 65% want one, and the A4 information 60% think that's a good idea because again, as Lucy made the point earlier, we're talking to a particular kind of audience and we may not have very many children with us. We don't know if we do or we don't, but we may not. So that's been really helpful. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. So now I think you've waited very patiently, so I think we should turn to the Q&A. And I'd like to start by one where I have the same question, Terry. Thank you. Terry and I would like to know, what is short cross? Please,
it's
Wendy.
basically a cross that doesn't go across the whole of the coin, so it's short because it doesn't. So you can see on my title page, this is a short cross because it doesn't go to the edge of the coin. but it is a silly name. I have to confess, numismatists have got really unimaginative names for coins, and a lot of them are confusing because they're very similar to a name for another coin, but that's basically what it means. Canute had 4 coin issues, and this is the one with a short cross on the back, so that's what it's called.
And long cross obviously is the longer version of that from what you've been talking about tonight. And are they common? Did you say short crosses were very common, or?
It's the biggest issue of Canute by a long way, and that's one of the things we do. As I said earlier, we don't know exactly when the issues were changed, so the fact that there's a lot of short cross could either mean that the country's really wealthy and they're minting loads of money, or it could mean that they were actually producing them for longer and there's more of them to be found. It's one thing that we just really don't know.
Gosh, okay. Well, thank you for clearing that up, because I have to say that was in my head all the way through, short cross. I'm imagining it's what it sounds like, but you know, let's just know. So that's great.
It is what it is.
Thanks for your question, Terry. So we have a question from Mr. Farley now, from the Bucks Archaeological Society. So he asks, as Canute ruled Norway, yes, Norway, were there any mints with original images there? And when were the first mints?
Yeah, interesting question. I haven't done much work on Norway yet. I do know Canute was actually sort of invited to invade Norway because the Norwegians were fed up with their current king. I do know that coinage was introduced into Scandinavia about the 990s, pretty much the same period as with the Irish Vikings as well. All this money starts to appear in the 990s, and it's mostly copy and Ethelred because English coinage is obviously the best. But I'm not sure about images of Canute on Norwegian coins because I've not had an opportunity yet to get my hands on any publications with Norwegian coins in, unfortunately.
Yes, okay, thank you. We've got a couple of questions about the finding of the hoard. So Wendy's asking who found the hoard, and also another person is asking, why did people bury hoards? What was that all about?
I have to confess I can't remember the name of the detectorist off the top of my head. But
I'm afraid I don't remember the second.
So sorry if you're watching. It's not, your name's not been in my brain for a long time. So basically, hoards, the equivalent of a bank account. Hoards have existed from the Roman period all the way through to the late Middle Ages. And it's just the way, it's like having a safe in your house, basically. You put your money away somewhere hidden for safekeeping. And that's basically what it is. There's a lot of debate with some hoards as to whether they're ritual deposits, but that's just a word archaeologists like to throw around a lot. And I do think the simple fact is, it's the equivalent of a safe. They've buried their money somewhere where nobody can see it, so it doesn't go missing. And that's why we have so many hoards, because people for some reason die before they get it all out of the ground, or they tell their loved ones. I mean, we've got some wonderful examples from the treasure process, sort of English Civil War hoards buried, literally in a hurry because they're going off to war. And we have the wonderful hoard that was found in London, the Hackney gold coins that were buried by a Jewish family during the war. So basically people hoard more when there's conflict going on, but the bottom line is it's the old equivalent of a bank account.
That's great. The Ros has come back to us to say I was right about the first name. Yes, Paul Coleman was the finder.
Of course. Yeah. Sorry, Paul.
Thank you, Ros. And Julia has a similar question to all of this. It's about, you speculated a little bit earlier about what might trigger the hoard, and you possibly really already answered that question. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about that. It's really the same discussion.
No, as I say, it's just the money's put away for safekeeping. As I say, that there's just more of them when there's conflict going on. I don't think there was any conflict to trigger this hoard being buried. I think it was a trader's savings, basically, and he's probably hidden them, within his property. And it's one of those things. I mean, we obviously know from Doomsday who lived in Lenborough at Doomsday. So one of those people mentioned in the Doomsday book were probably the son or the grandson of the person who buried the hoard.
Great. Yeah, somebody's asking, and I think this is probably a very difficult question to know the answer to, but they're asking whether the image of the king, or any of them, bore any resemblance to reality. I guess that's something that we just can't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to answer, especially in this period. The images are very stylized. Obviously, if you have earlier Roman coins, a lot of them are very good, you know, portraits of the actual person, and we know that because we've got wonderful statues of Roman emperors. But it's a lot harder to say in this period. I mean, they're obviously very stylized, the designs, and we don't have hardly any images of Canute. I mean, the one in the Winchester Gospel is probably one of the few contemporary images we have of him. So unfortunately, it's very, very hard to answer that question. Yeah,
it's great question there. It'd be great to know, wouldn't it? And I suppose this is a little bit like squirrels, but Pam is saying, you know, if they've deposited their hoard and gone away, and it's, you know, you're in the middle of conflict or whatever very good reason they might have deposited it, how do they, remember where to go back and find it again?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, most people would bury it somewhere with a marker. So, for instance, a tree. We've had Roman coin hoards turn up in the middle of what would have been a field in the Roman period, so it's possible that they buried it under a particular tree. We've had a hoard from Leicester that was found in a massive chest that was in a building, so it was probably sort of hidden under the floor in a building. But yeah, the simple answer is you'd bury it somewhere that you'd remember where you buried it, and if you don't remember, then it stays in the ground until someone finds it.
Like we just did. Yes, great. So Lynn is asking a very interesting question about the Buckingham Mint. Were there any coins? And what have you learned about that mint?
There are some coins from the Buckingham Mint. I can't say I haven't learned much about the Buckingham Mint yet, because I haven't got to the stage where I'm looking at individual mints, but obviously there was a small selection of Buckingham coins. I think, is it 12 from memory? And they were obviously on display at Buckingham Old Jail, because I had to go there and record them, which was rather nice. But yeah, Buckingham had a mint. It would have been the mint for the county at the time. Not that counties actually existed. Again, that's a whole nother lecture about when counties were developed and when towns became county towns. But yeah, there is a local mint and there are some local coins in the hoard, but interestingly, not that many. So there are some from Buckingham, but there aren't many from the surrounding other mints like Oxford. So that in itself is an interesting situation that will need a bit of work.
Yes, and as Wendy says there, when they're open again, Buckingham Old Jail do have some of those coins there on display. Now, somebody'd like to have a lively debate with you. Kevin would like to debate your theory about Canute being a great king, Wendy. Okay, so he says, if lots of the coins went to Scandinavia, was that not taking wealth out of the English economy? So maybe he wasn't such a great king?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say to that is there's more of Ethelred's coins in Scandinavia than Canute's, because Ethelred was desperately paying the Vikings off to go away, and it was a plan that obviously didn't work because Canute and his dad came back and invaded the country. The simple answer is, I mean, again, this is one of the questions I hope I can reveal some information about during the project, is that we know there was a lot of trade going on with Scandinavia and England, and it makes perfect sense. We're neighbours after all. You know, the sea would be the highway of the day. We know recent research has shown there's a massive wool trade going on with Northern Europe, and that might be one of the reasons why England was such a wealthy country at this period, as they were in the high medieval period with the monasteries and the wool trade. But yeah, it's hard to quantify, but my gut instinct would be to say there's more Ethelred coinage in Scandinavia than Canute's English coinage. But he did obviously pay, one of the things Canute did when he became king was he raised a geld to pay the army, and he basically paid his troops off to go home to Scandinavia. So there was obviously an initial large payment of Canute's issues going back to Scandinavia with his troops. But there's probably a hell of a lot more Ethelred coinage in Scandinavia.
Well, I wonder if that's convinced you, Kevin, if you'd like to tell us if you now think that he's a really fantastic king or you remain slightly sceptical there. And whilst Kevin thinks about that one, somebody else has asked a really good question about where the silver would have come from. Do we know, Wendy?
We do know that a lot of silver for European coinage actually came from Germany. And one of my supervisors, Chris Lovelock, has actually done a project with a few other colleagues recently, and they've managed to trace quite a lot of the source of silver that was used in coinage to Germany. So that's one source. Obviously, a lot of the coinage was made from older coinage because it would be sent to mint, melted down and remade. And there's also a lot of documentary evidence, especially during Ethelred's reign, where people were basically handing in church silver and precious items made of silver to be melted down to turn into coins so that Ethelred could pay the geld. So there'd be lots of sources, but the main one for coins, we think, is German silver mines.
Wow, not what I was expecting you to say there. That's really interesting. You seem to have convinced Kevin. He says it sounds plausible. Thank you very much. That's a good robust challenge, I thought there, Kevin. Thank you for adding a little bit of debate in there. And we've had some not really any more comments there, but so one or two suggestions about our possible displays. Somebody thought that the sort of tinkling of the sounds of lots of coins being thrown together might be a sound effect that we might want to think about, and somebody else thought that perhaps, you know, the coin striking in person. There's a few health and safety issues around doing that, you know, not in a Jorvik Viking sort of centre type way, or I don't know if they still do that, but they certainly did when I was working at the Ark there next to them. So I think we have answered all the questions that have come in that I can see anyway. So there are some really great questions there. Thank you very much, audience. So just remains for me to thank Wendy for her time in preparing all of this for us and coming along and telling us all about the research that she's managed to do so far. And we're really hopeful that things will improve and that at some point she might be able to get to Denmark and do some of that study, because that would be absolutely fascinating. And I hope, Wendy, that you'll come back and maybe, you know, in a few months' time and tell us what more you've been able to learn about these coins, because that really was incredible. We've had quite a few people. Julia's just put a comment in saying thank you very much, it was great. Lots of other people have also deposited. Yes, Marion is also saying really interesting, can't wait to see your comments there. Lots of people saying it's been a really great talk there. And thank you, Lucy's also reiterating how great it's been. So thank you all for many of you, 50 or 60 of you tonight, giving up your time to come along and listen to us talking about this very significant display. And I hope that when we are finally able to open our doors again to you, and with our brand new Discover Bucks galleries, that you will all come and see the Ethelred and Canute coins and what we've finally come up with for the Lenborough Hoards. It's still in development, but we're very grateful to you all for coming along tonight. As I say, don't forget we're recording this, so if you want to see it again or you want to pass it on to somebody else, in a few days it will be up on our website. But for now, good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.